Joining me now, South Carolina Congresswoman, member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure and Oversight and Veteran Affairs Committees, Nancy Mace. Congresswoman, will this make a difference in offsetting ransomware attacks, cyber attacks?
Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't really mean a hill of beans at this juncture. It's just a memo. I'm calling it a memo to self with some future goals. There's no meat on the bones here. And look, in December of last year, in 2020, there were 11 federal agencies that were hacked by organizations aligned with Russia. We saw with the Colonial Pipeline earlier this year how devastating that hacking was. There were Chinese actors that hacked Verizon, and we could go on, but cybersecurity is national security, and it doesn't seem like it's a real true priority right now. Just this week, I worked with Democrat Ro Khanna on legislation. I'm hoping it will come to the floor for a vote in the House today or tomorrow before we recess. And that particular measure would allow, it's the Federal Rotational Cybersecurity Workforce Program Act, and would allow our federal agencies to operate more like a business and a bureaucracy with rotating cyber resources around the federal agencies. And so we need to take further steps to ensure both the private and public sector are protected against these hackers. It's a major, major issue, and it's affecting all of us.
You've introduced your own bipartisan bill to address these issues, and along with Congressman Ro Khanna, what does this bill do? What does it do beyond what the president is doing?
Well, it would allow federal agencies to operate more like businesses do in the private sector, allowing rotational workforce individuals and employees to go around and work at different agencies and learn and utilize what they've learned, the technology assets they've learned in those jobs. Being rotational allows them to take on broader skills and learn more at their job and while they're working. That's what a lot of the private sector does. There are other things that we should also be doing in cyber. A lot of times when companies are hacked, they're often sued or fined by the federal government, and that's something that I wish the Biden administration would address and allow us to work on some of those issues. We have, companies that get hacked spend millions of dollars investing in their businesses to protect their customer data. We've also got to protect the American people's data, and the Rotational Workforce Program would allow us to do that, would allow us to use ideas and resources much like a business would, but doing it in different federal agencies.
I want to get your reaction to the Senate moving forward on that $1.2 trillion infrastructure package. There were 17 Republicans that voted yes on it, and some notable Republicans that said heck no. Rick Scott, a no. Ted Cruz, a no. Tim Scott wrote this: I voted no on infrastructure a week ago because there was no legislative text. My mind hasn't changed. There's still no legislative text or explanation on how to pay for a $1 trillion infrastructure plan. He tweeted that about 11 hours ago. Some of the ideas on paying for it are, well, typical budget gimmicks like extending cuts to future Medicare spending that never happen. However, what's in it for the Republicans in this? What is the offset? What did they get in return for agreeing to this?
Nobody knows. Yeah, nobody knows. There is no bill. There's no language to look at and read. No one really knows what it'll look like at the end of the day. They had a cloture vote last night on a bill that doesn't exist. So I'm sort of like, forget human infrastructure. This is ghost infrastructure. They're going to be debating and voting on this measure likely tomorrow. They'll have markup next week. But the bill literally doesn't exist. It's not worth the paper it's printed on right now. And there's some things I saw outlined. I was following Twitter last night because that's how I had to learn about it. There were no, I guess, Nancy Pelosi's bipartisanship is to allow no House members, including the ranking member and chairman, to be part of those bipartisan negotiations. I think that's wrong. But there's some things that concern me in what I've seen. More money invested in Amtrak than literally almost anything else in this supposed package. Also, electrical vehicle charging stations. That could be an entire sector in the private energy industry. I don't know why the government wants to take it over. And then we just don't know how we're going to pay for it. And there's over $1 trillion floating around of COVID relief funds that haven't been spent yet. Couldn't we use some of those dollars?
About $200 billion would be used to pay for this new infrastructure package. Joseph Pinion is here. I know he wants to jump in. Joseph?
Yeah, absolutely, Congresswoman. I mean, to that point, we're talking about $1 trillion that has not actually been spent on COVID relief that had very little to do with COVID. You talk about the imminent threats of infrastructure. You know, in many ways, in order to address a problem, you have to acknowledge the problem exists. How do we get people to kind of walk away from the peak stupid happening in the swamp, where we understand intuitively that these individuals in Russia are hacking at the behest at the Kremlin, not in spite of the Kremlin. These individuals in China are hacking at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party, not in spite of them. This is what's happening right now. These are people acting effectively at the behest of the government, and our government seems to want to pretend that their government knows nothing that's happening.
Right. They want to issue memos and have verbal slaps on the wrist. And I sort of liken it to this right now with Russia and China. The United States can't get out of the locker room right now, and China's out there bench pressing 200 pounds and on supplements. We need to be stronger on Russia and China regarding hacking and cybersecurity, both in the public and private sector. We need to do more to support businesses when they do get hacked, rather than sue them and fine them. Allow them the ability and the resources to ensure that that data is protected in the future. Give them those resources. And it's really confusing to me. This is why Congress is hated. This is why some of us up here hate Congress, voting on measures we don't know anything about. We don't even know what specifically is in the bill.
Thank you. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thank you so much for that.